We have Mike Matthews. I didn't say this, but today we have Mike Matthews, and it's he's going to be talking about passwords. And I love his title here. I hate passwords, and we all hate passwords. So he's going to give us some tips and things like that. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike. While Mike is starting out, I'm going to dig up the PDF and put that in the chat, so anyone that's on a Mac will be able to download that. And of course, we will. I will send that out in an email as well. I think I sent it out yesterday as well, but with a follow-up email. So, Mike, it is all yours. I'm going to stop sharing, and the stage is yours.
Okay. All right. So let me share my screen, and we'll get underway. So yes, the topic here today is I hate passwords. This is me. You already know who I am if you've been coming in these meetings. It's a pleasure to speak to this group. I always find it very enlightening. You guys are on the ball down here. But if you need to get a hold of me, that's where I can be found. So we're going to do a brief history of passwords. But before I get into that, I think most of you know, I was a longtime member of the Apple Consultants Network. I do consulting for home users, just like you. And just anecdotally, when I go to somebody's house because they're having a problem with their Apple devices, this is what I see. 90% of the time, there's a password problem. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be I forgot a password. I don't know this password. I need to change my passwords. I don't know what these passwords are. 90% of the time, there may be some other things going on, but 90% of the time, there's a password problem. It's just the curse of being a human, I guess. You all probably remember the very first password you ever had, for most of you, was probably your ATM PIN. I don't know about you, but I was a Bank of America customer at the time, and they sent me a card in the mail with a little slip of paper inside with a 4-digit code on it with my PIN so I could get money out of the ATM machines. And so back in the day, that ATM PIN, it had a real strong pro feature to it, which was it was very easy to remember 4 numbers. The human brain is wired to be able to do that pretty easily. But the con is that those passwords, those little 4-digit passwords, are too short, and they're prone to easy guesses. So for example, if you use a 4-digit passcode on your iPhone and you pick 1111, that's maybe not such a good password to have on your iPhone. So as the world got more complicated and passwords became more prevalent, we moved into having to have a password that was simpler than what we see most of the time today. More than 4-digit codes, more like an easy to remember but hard to guess password. And the idea back then was, okay, we want you to come up with something that's you're not going to forget, but that other people may not guess, and use it everywhere. That's your password for everything. And the problem with that, of course, is that maybe it's not so hard to guess. So if your password is the name of your dog, and some people know the name of your dog, and your name is Paris Hilton, then you might get your account hacked, right? So this idea of this one simple password that's easy to remember, hard to guess, that fell by the wayside as well. Just not really what anybody wants to have these days. So then we moved into a situation where we had to have 8-character passwords. Letters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase. These are better at withstanding a brute force attack. But it turns out they're hard to remember, and they're actually still too short. Even 8-character passwords are too short. There are software programs out there that will try to crack passwords. They never get tired, and they try every possible combination out there. And 8 characters is just not enough these days. So where are we exactly? We're now in the land of strong passwords. Unique 16-character passwords, letters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, a unique 16-character password for every account you have. The problem with this is, of course, people can't remember these. And this is the current state of where we need to be, everybody. Unique 16-character passwords, just for your own protection. But people can't handle that, right? It's amazing to me that human beings came up with a security idea that human beings can't do. Nobody really foresaw how the web and online accounts was going to play such a major role in everybody's life when this whole password thing got started. And so this is where we are now, unique 16-character strong passwords, which people can't remember. So there's just a lot of reasons why we hate passwords. One of them is it's too much friction. There are some people who don't ever want to set a password for anything because they just cannot stand to be slowed down by having to type in a password. I hope that's not any of you. I'm pretty sure it's not. They're hard to remember. I have to know this password. I can't remember this password. Some people will take a password and they'll make variations of it. I just visited a client the other day and he was trying to log into his Mac and he was sure he was typing his password correctly. And I went over to his house and I typed his password in and we got in. You know, it's simple as that. So people choose passwords that they think they can remember, but then they'll vary it a little bit. And people throw their hands up and say, forget it. I can't remember. I don't care. I don't care. I'm just going to go with whatever makes sense for me. Sometimes passwords are confusing. Your device will pop up a screen, enter your password. Which password? Apple ID password? Device password? Some other device's password? The account password? It gets a little confusing at times for people. Here's the big one that I've run into more often than not. I can't bear not to know my password. I have to know my password. I have to know it. I mean, it doesn't matter if I write it down and put it in a safe deposit box, I have to know what my password is. Well, if you take anything away from this session that we have today, this is the one to learn. You don't have to know all your passwords. There's only a couple you really need to know, and you can let your device take care of the rest. But there are some folks who can't bear not to know their password, so they create simple passwords that are easy to crack. They use it everywhere. It's just a big problem. And lastly, my data is not that important anyway. Who would want my data? I'm not that important. Well, you are. You know, if you've got social security numbers inside of apps, or you've got travel data, or you have your calendar in there that people can see, or to your email, your data is important. You need to protect it. And unfortunately, right now, passwords are the way that that's done. So there's all kinds of examples of how people try to solve this problem. You know, they might pick a lousy password and use it everywhere, something like this. The password cracking programs are in tune to this stuff. In fact, the most common password that's used these days is the word password. And it's the first thing that the password cracking software tries. So even variations where you're substituting characters for letters, I wouldn't try that. Some of you may do things like this. We'll post-it note on the computer with your password on it. Not only is this a weak password, but it's right out in the open. Or maybe you've got a list in the upper desk drawer, right? Or here's a good strong password, but it's right on the front of the computer where anybody can see it. That's not a good thing either. A lot of people carry around little books with passwords in them, and they carry those books around with them. And if you lose that book, you've lost your passwords, right? And sometimes I've seen books where people are writing their passwords in and they're scratching things out and they're writing over letters and numbers. And then it comes time to look that password up and they can't read their own writing. They have no idea which password is current. And sure enough, they'll try the wrong password too many times. They'll get locked out, and then it's another hassle to try to solve. And I certainly hope none of you are doing this, right? Where you're writing the password on your hand so that you always have it with you and you can look at it whenever you need it. So these are all real life examples, by the way. There's various layers of passwords you need to be concerned about. The first one is device passwords or passcodes. On the Mac, Apple calls this a password. On the iPhone, the iPad, and the watch, it's called a passcode, but it's essentially the same thing. It's what unlocks the device to give you access to your device or access to your account on the device. So the Mac, as we all know, is a multi-user machine. Every account on the Mac can have its own siloed set of data protected by the user's password. The iPhone, the iPad, and the watch are built for single use. They all have a passcode. As you probably remember, the iPhone started out with a 4-digit PIN. Actually, before that, I don't think it had a password at all. It's since now by default wants you to create a 6-digit PIN, although you always have the option to create 4-digit PIN or an alphanumeric password if you like. Now, to try to make some of this simpler, a lot of devices that Apple produces have biometric sensors in them, like Touch ID or Face ID. If you enable those features on your device, you can use Touch ID or Face ID to bypass having to type in the password or passcode all the time. You still have to know the password or the passcode. In fact, this is one of the 2 passwords you absolutely have to know. You have to know this. Because if you don't remember it, nobody can help you break through. Apple can't help you. I can't come to your house and help you. If you don't remember your device passcode on your iPhone, your iPad, and your watch, it's a big problem. On the Mac, there may be ways to get in and reset an administrative password. But on the iPhone, the iPad, and the Apple Watch, if you forget that password, you have to reset the device and erase it and start over. So this one, you have to know. After that, there's your Apple ID and its password. So the Apple ID is something that you set up when you got one of your Apple devices. It consists of a username, which is an email address, and a password, which hopefully is unique. You're not using it anywhere else. I used to tell people that this would be a good one to know, but you didn't really have to. You could store it securely on your device and look it up if you needed it. But I've come to the conclusion that this is another one you absolutely need to know. There's a lot of times when you're going to be asked for your Apple ID password. Frequently, when you update software on your devices, you're asked to, re-log in, quote unquote, with your Apple ID password. This is something you probably need to know. So device password or passcode and Apple ID password, you should know those. You'll be asked for them too many times not to know them. And then lastly, there's everything else. This is usually a username, typically an email address, but not always, and a password you create. These are the ones you don't have to know. These are the ones that you can store on your device securely and have the device plug them in when you need them. And so these days, all of us should be using some sort of a password manager. There's lots of password managers out there. There are some that run on the Mac. There are some that run on Windows. There are some that run on both. But all of them at their core, there's like a core set of features that all of them should have. And that includes the ability to create strong passwords. And they are guaranteed to be unique for every account. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to somebody's house and tried to straighten out their password problem. And we're going to change the password on some website. And I say, okay, what do you want your password to be? And they totally freeze because they cannot think of a password to use. They're just frozen. The password manager can do that for you without you having to even think about it. So strong passwords guaranteed to be unique for every account. A password manager will securely store and synchronize them to all your devices. It'll plug them in when you need them, when you visit a website or when you open an app. It'll point out weak or duplicative passwords that you've got stored. And it will also note when an account has been breached and that your password may have been put out into the open. So there's a lot of third-party products that can do stuff like this. 1Password, LastPass, I think there's DashPass. I can't even know all the names of them all. But there's also one that is built into all of Apple's devices, and it's called the keychain. For those of you longtime Mac users, the keychain has been on the Mac for well over 20 years, 25 years. It was originally developed not only to store usernames and passwords, but to also store name, address, phone number, credit card numbers. The genesis of this was back in the very, very, very early days of the web. We would visit a website and it was your first time visiting the website and you were trying to buy something online and you've created the account, now the vendor you're dealing with wants you to fill in all this information about yourself: shipping address, email address, credit card number. And so the keychain's original purpose was to make that easier to do, to store all that stuff on the keychain, and with a couple of clicks on the screen, fill that information out for you really rapidly. And that's pretty much all the keychain did for a very, very long time. But recently, Apple's been beefing up the keychain on all of its devices to the point where it now is a password manager. It can do all of those things that we listed earlier: create strong passwords, make sure they're unique, securely store and sync them. And it's free and it's built in. And if you're using all Apple products and you're using Safari as your web browser, you probably don't need to have a third-party password manager. Now, some third-party password managers go a little bit farther than the keychain, as you might expect. Some allow you to share password vaults with other people or create multiple vaults. The keychain is a fairly straightforward, fairly simple password manager, really built for individual use. So if you're not using it, you might want to think about it as we talk more about some of its features. So again, if you want to see your passwords on your device, if you're using the keychain, in Safari, you can go up to the Safari menu and choose either Preferences or Settings and click on Passwords and see them. And on your iPad or iPhone, you can tap Settings and then Passwords and see your passwords. Now, the passwords are stored on your device and they're protected by your device password or passcode. So if I were to open up the passwords window on my Mac right now, it would ask me for my Mac password before it would show those passwords to me. Same idea on the iPhone or the iPad. If somebody grabs my unlocked iPhone and runs down the street with it and wants to look at my passwords, if they tap Settings on my unlocked phone and then they tap Passwords, it's going to ask them, in my case, for Face ID to work or for a passcode to be entered. So your passwords are protected on your device by your device passcode or password. Okay. Cheetah, any questions yet?
Not yet.
Oh boy, I think I've put everybody to sleep.
No, you haven't. They're enthralled.
Okay. So let me see what else I have here slide-wise. Okay, one other thing about the keychain. The keychain data syncs through iCloud. So within the iCloud settings on all of your devices, there's a keychain box or button or item that you can tap to turn on the keychain, the iCloud keychain. What this does is it synchronizes all of your password data between your devices.
Mike,
yep.
Mike, your screen is blank. Are you showing something on your screen?
I'm about to.
Okay.
How about that?
How about that?
Okay. So here's iCloud, right? And here's an iPhone and a Mac. And so if you turn on the iCloud keychain on your devices, if you add a password to your phone, that information will sync up to iCloud and sync back down to your Mac. Now, this password data is encrypted at rest on your devices. It's protected by your device passwords or passcodes. It's encrypted in transit through the internet. It's encrypted in iCloud by your Apple ID password. Apple does not have your Apple ID password. It does not want your Apple ID password. If you forget your Apple ID password, Apple cannot reset it for you. You have to figure out a way to do that. So Apple cannot get into your keychain data. They don't have the capability, and frankly, they don't want the capability. So this is an example of how iCloud keychain can work. From one device through iCloud to another, keeping all of your passwords in sync on all of your devices. So just to reiterate one more time, password management. Device password or passcode, these are the things you really have to know. You have to know these. Apple ID password, you better know this one too. You'll be asked for it too many times. This is a good one. You should know this one also by heart. The rest of these, let the keychain do the rest. Let the keychain store your Lowe's password. Let it store your AT&T password. Let it store your Amazon password. And you don't have to know what they are, because the keychain knows what they are and will plug them in when you need it. Okay? Any questions?
Yes, we do have several questions. James Corsica, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? David Winograd, you're next.
Thank you. Matt, I've always wondered about this. Do these password decrypting programs create a successful match one character at a time, or does it have to be the whole set? Because those are very different probabilities.
I'm pretty sure it's the whole set.
So for example, if you have a 15-character password, it tries 15 characters all at once?
I believe that's right, which is
Wow.
why it takes decades for a 16-character password to be broken.
Okay, thanks.
All right. David, you're next. Keith Kaiser, you're after David.
Hi, I'm wondering if you're using a password manager like 1Password and you have keychain going at the same time, which password takes precedence? And do they work well together?
Well, they work separately, right? It's like you're having two different password managers with two different sets of data. So I actually have 1Password on my Mac, which I used to use religiously until the last couple of years when the keychain has gotten so much better. I use the keychain pretty much exclusively now. So the problem with having multiple password managers is you have to keep them in sync, and they don't sync directly. So if you change a password for Macy's on the keychain, you got to go into 1Password and change it there as well. Now, having said that, I still use 1Password on occasion because it has some additional features that the keychain does not. Things like identities and the ability to store secure notes and software licenses and that sort of thing. But as far as we're concerned these days, I'm using the keychain exclusively. I'm really not needing to use 1Password any longer, except for this very limited case of identity stuff. I live in a house with 3 other people. And so sometimes I have to be the key master on the passwords for some people here, right? I have to keep track of some people's passwords because some people have a harder time with that. But other than that, everything that I'm doing these days is in the keychain.
One other thing, when you hit a site and you're presented with a password, is there any rhyme or reason to which one comes first, either keychain or 1Password?
Well, for example, on my phone, if I had 1Password turned on to autofill passwords along with the keychain, then a little strip above the keyboard would offer both options.
I see.
I could fill in the password from the keychain, or I could fill it in from 1Password. And I haven't used 1Password on the Mac in a long time. I imagine there's a similar way to approach that. I know that 1Password has, or used to have at least, a button that would show up in the toolbar as an extension. And so when you went to a website, you would click that button in the toolbar, and that would tell 1Password to fill in the details. If you use the keychain, you just click in the username field, and the keychain will offer to fill in the username and password from there. So you can on the phone, I know, and I think the iPad as well, use autofill from, I think, up to 2 password managers at the same time. And then it's your choice about which one you want to pick.
All right, thank you. Keith Kaiser, you're next. And Gail, you're after Keith.
Good morning or afternoon. Morning.
Morning.
Does Keychain work with any of the other browsers, Firefox or Chrome?
You know, I don't use those browsers, so I don't know 100%. It works best with Safari, clearly. But maybe somebody else has some feedback on that. I can tell you this, there are some people in this world who use Windows machines. And Apple has improved iCloud for Windows quite a bit in the last year or so. If you download iCloud for Windows to your Windows machine, you can sync your iCloud keychain from your Windows machine through iCloud to your Apple devices and back. And there is a browser extension for Chrome and for Edge, I believe, on Windows that will allow you to plug the keychain data in while you're using Chrome, but that's only on Windows. I don't think it works on the Mac. I'm very sure it doesn't work on the Mac. So I think if you're in Chrome, you might have to use, if you want to use a password manager that's built into Chrome, you could do that. Or you could use a third-party product instead if you were comfortable with that. But I'm not sure that, because I don't use Chrome and I don't use any other browser but Safari, I'm not sure how well the keychain integrates with those other apps. Does anybody else know the answer to that? Dan, you
If
know?
you do,
I don't think it does,
yeah.
Mike. And like you said, it does on the Windows side, but I have not found, I'm with you. I use Safari primarily, although I do have to use Chrome for some stuff with YouTube.
Right.
But I always have to save it in Chrome using their password manager.
Yeah. And that gets to be a pain if it's spread out all over the place, right? You got some passwords over here and some passwords over there. The best idea is to just settle on one password manager and use that exclusively if you can. And so, as I mentioned earlier, if you've got all Apple devices and you're using Safari, the keychain is right in the sweet spot.
All right, Gail, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, Mike, you mentioned that we had to have 16 characters, but the device password is only 6 characters. So how secure is this really?
Well, a 6-character password, 6 numbers, can be pretty secure on the iPhone and the iPad for a couple of different reasons. As long as you don't choose a real obvious 6-digit passcode, like I wouldn't choose 11111, for example.
Okay.
You may have noticed if you fail to enter your passcode on the iPhone or the iPad successfully, after about 3 times, I think it is, the iPhone says you need to wait a minute before you can enter the password again.
Yeah.
If you fail again, then it's like you got to wait 5 minutes. If you fail again, you got to wait an hour. If you fail again, you got to wait a longer period of time, so that the amount of time between those failed passcode attempts stretches out to, I think, over a day, even maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there's also a switch built into the iPhone and the iPad that says after 10 failed passcode attempts, erase the device.
Great. Yeah.
And you can do that too. But the failed passcode feature, where it kind of stretches out the time between entries, that's like that's the grandchild password protection feature, right? It keeps your grandchild from grabbing your phone and typing a bunch of numbers in and trying to get into your phone.
Yeah.
They'll actually give up if they can't get in fast enough, right?
Okay.
But it does provide that level of protection at least.
Hey, Mike, could
Yep.
you also at least talk a little bit about how important it is to hide that 6-digit passcode or 4-digit passcode? Because anybody watching you type that in, if like you're at a bar, Joanna Stern just had a thing on this, they can get at everything.
Yeah,
Use
that's
your biometric thing. So yeah, go ahead.
That is a big deal. It became much more prevalent here just in the last month or so, as Dan is mentioning. If somebody manages to get your iPhone passcode somehow, right? They either look over your shoulder and see you typing it in. If they are able to get that information and log into your phone with your passcode, they can then go in and change your Apple ID password without any other authentication required. And then you've got a big problem, right? Because once they get in and change your Apple ID password and they know your phone passcode, they've got access to all your passwords, and they're mucking around with your Apple ID at that point. So the thing to keep in mind about this is that your device passcode, particularly on the phone and the iPad, these mobile devices that are out and around a lot, it needs to be good, right? It can't be 111111. In fact, it's probably a better practice to create an alphanumeric passcode for your iPhone and iPad. Because if somebody's trying to watch you type that in, it's a little bit harder to tell what you're typing because the keyboard is so much smaller and your finger is covering that part of the screen. But the key thing is you got to protect that password. You got to have a good, strong device passcode or password, and you got to protect that. And alphanumeric might be the way to go, actually. And beyond that, Touch ID and Face ID, you should try to set those up as well. Don't be afraid of those technologies. They're very good. I know for a lot of older people, I've heard fingerprints start to fade as you get older and Touch ID doesn't work quite as well. I never had really good success with Touch ID for some reason. If I would go out in the backyard and pull weeds and tear my fingers up, Touch ID would stop working. So I moved to a Face ID iPad as fast as I could. Face ID for me is super reliable. And anytime you can unlock your device with Touch ID or Face ID instead of typing in a passcode, that's also a best practice because it prevents somebody from looking over your shoulder and seeing what you're typing. So,
Okay.
Was not done.
We're going to continue on. Do you
I was
want
not
to
done with my question and Dan interrupted me.
go ahead, Gail?
I want to know how you can delete passwords in Keychain because it remembers every damn password you've ever had for an account. If you change your password, it doesn't automatically delete the old one.
well, it should try to replace the old one with the new one. But when we get to demonstrating the keychain here in a minute, I'll show you how to delete it. All you have to do is just swipe on it. Just swipe right to left and tap delete, and that'll remove the keychain data from the keychain.
Yes, I know that. It's just a pain in the neck. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no edit button there. You go down and tap a bunch on the list and delete all at one time. You got to do them one at a time. Okay.
All right, all yours, Mike. All yours.
Okay, that's it for the slides. So I'm going to now share my phone screen. And we're on the middle of page 4 in the handout, if any of you are following along. So let me share my phone. Okay. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is setting up the iCloud keychain. I'm just going to demonstrate this on the phone. The steps are pretty much the same, whether you're using an iPad or a Mac. If you tap Settings, and you tap your name, and you tap iCloud, there's an option here for passwords and keychain. And you just turn it on. And that will allow you to synchronize the data on this device up to iCloud. So if you're going to do this, I'd recommend you do it on all your devices. Do it on the iPad as well. Do it on the Mac as well. On the Mac, it's under the Apple menu, pick either System Preferences or System Settings. Click iCloud or Apple ID and find the box for iCloud keychain and just give that a check. Now you have to make sure in order to do this, you have to have two-factor authentication turned on with your Apple ID. I'm pretty sure most of you are probably already doing that. But it may also ask you to enter your Apple ID password, potentially the first time you set this up. But normally it's just a matter of finding this setting and turning it on. And that will synchronize your password data between your devices. Now you can also turn on password autofill. This allows your device to automatically want to fill in usernames and passwords from the keychain for you. So on your phone, for example, you go to Settings, and from this main settings screen, just scroll up till you find Face ID and passcode, or Touch ID and passcode, whichever one you have. Enter your passcode. And there's a switch here for password autofill. So just turn that on, and you can use Face ID to automatically fill in passwords. So I've got an app from State Farm, for example. I open the State Farm app, and Face ID sees my face and plugs in the username and the password without me doing anything at all. I don't even have to tap the screen to make that happen. So make sure password autofill is turned on here. This will save you quite a bit of time when having passwords filled in for you automatically. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you an example of how the keychain can create a strong password. I'm going to go to a website. I think it's the only website in the world where I don't have an account already. And you're probably guessing which one that is. That's right, it's Victoria's Secret. So I'm going to apologize for whatever picture comes up here in advance. But here's the Victoria's Secret website. I don't have an account here, but I want to create an account. So where is this account creation button? Every website's going to be a little bit different. I think in this case, it's probably underneath this little 3-line hamburger button up here in the corner. So if I tap this and I scroll up a little bit, here's where I can log in if I have an account, or here's where I go if I want to create an account. So I'm going to tap create an account. And they're going to want my name. And they want an email address, and that's fine. You might notice here, I've got this thing called hide my email that's popping up here as an option. This is something that you get with iCloud Plus. You have the ability to give the vendor kind of a bogus email address. And that's the email address they have for you. And when they send email to that address, Apple forwards it to your real email address. But in this case, I'm not really too concerned about that. I'm just going to go ahead and pick my email address. And you'll notice the next thing that's coming up here is create the password, right? 8 characters, 1 lower, 1 upper, blah, 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 blah. They've got some certain minimums involved. I'm going to go ahead and plug my email address in here. And what you cannot see on the screen down below here is that this bottom half of the screen is telling me iPhone created a strong password from this website. This password will be saved to your iCloud keychain and will autofill on all your devices. You can look up your saved passwords in settings or by asking Siri. And so there's a button down here that says use the strong password or other options, which means create your own. Now, in this case, you can see the strong password up here, XEDFYN-9DIQNA-PANSY. This thing is so long, I can't even see the end of it, right? If I tap the show button, I'll be able to see it. But the point here is the keychain created a strong password. It's unique, and I don't have to know what it is because the keychain will remember it. So if I tap the button down here that you can't see that says use the strong password, that has already stored my username and password on the keychain. I have not created the account yet with Victoria's Secret. I've taken all the steps I need to take, but the account doesn't get created until I tap this submit button, okay? But if I go back into the settings app and I tap passwords, and Face ID needs to see my face to unlock my passwords. Here are all my passwords. I hop down here to the V's. Here's Victoria's Secret. And the iPhone is blocking out the password, but it's here. I can just tap it to see it. XEDFYN-9DIQNA-PAN-SYG. And I don't need to know that because the keychain knows it. And when I need to plug it in, the keychain will plug it in. So that's how easy it is, really, to create a strong password at a website. And I'm not even going to submit this to Victoria's Secret. So I have not created an account. The password really is meaningless. They still don't know who I am at this point. Any questions about that?
Not about that. We do have a list from before.
Okay.
Actually, Victoria, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Well, I've got 2, but the first one I had was, how do you create an alphanumeric passcode for the iPhone? I have a 6
Okay.
digit, but I'm just trying to figure out.
Okay. You can tap settings
Okay.
and Face ID or Touch ID and passcode, and
Right.
put in your existing passcode.
Oh.
So you get access to these Face ID and passcode settings.
I've got it. Yep.
Scroll up till you find change the passcode. You're going to put in your current passcode. And now enter your new one. And here under passcode options, you can pick a custom alphanumeric code, a custom numeric code, or a 4-digit numeric code.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the question you have in the chat. That's the question that I thought you were going to ask, Victoria, the one that's
Well,
in the
that was
chat.
actually the one I did above at 11:02. But the other question is it
Mhm.
possible to turn off the auto creation of a keychain password and let one password control? Because I personally, right now, at least until your talk today, prefer to use one password. But every time I go in to create a password, Safari jumps in to do that. And I prefer to use one password. And so I have to go through and do the option thing all the time.
I guess I'm not using one password on my phone, for example, so I'm not sure how you would do that. But I imagine that there's a way.
Well, I basically do all this on my Mac, not my phone. My phone becomes derivative from my Mac, basically.
I have a feeling that there's probably, if you click a one password button in the toolbar when you
Mhm.
visit a web page, does that allow you to create a strong password? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Yes, it does. But what I'm telling you is that when I try,
Mhm.
Safari/keychain comes in and bounces in and does its own thing. And so
You
you
could
have to
turn-
go in and deselect it or change the option. You have to do that each time.
On the Mac, you would turn autofill off in Safari's settings or preferences.
Right.
Okay.
So then it won't autofill. And on the iPhone, there is, I think it's under password, there
Right.
is an option where you can just tell it not to use Safari's or iCloud's keychain. And then it will solely use, yeah, is that where it is,
Yeah.
Mike? I think.
So right up here
Okay,
at the
thank
top of
you.
the password settings, if you tap password options, you can allow filling from different.
Oh, okay, that's good. Now let me bounce over to the next question, which is if I turn off autofill on the keychain, does that mean that even if I create a password with one password, it doesn't save over to the keychain?
I don't, if you create a password with one password, I don't think it's going to save in the keychain no matter what you do.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I
Two
thought.
separate sets of password information that you're having to manage.
Okay, I'll just have to figure it out. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So here is, for example, let me go back to one other thing, using the keychain maybe. I'm going to go to Adobe, DOBE.com, and I'm going to try to sign in here. So there's a sign in button up at the top. So I have a password with Adobe already. I'm not creating an account here. So down here at the bottom, it's saying, do you want to sign into Adobe with your saved password? In my case, I'm only filling from the keychain. I think if I had one password activated as well, I might have two options here. But in this case, I just have one. So the keychain is recognizing I'm on Adobe's website. It's got a password stored for me. So it says, well, here's the username you've been using. I'll just give that a tap. Face ID sees my face. Okay. Takes me to the next screen and it wants a code here. So here it comes. I'll put that in. Now it wants a password. So I tap on the password field. And at the bottom of the screen, you can't see down here, the phone is blocking it. It says, do you want to sign into Adobe with your saved password? I tap the big blue button that does that. Face ID sees my face. It plugs in my password. They want a backup email address. I'm going to skip that for now. And I've signed in, right? So all I have to do is really kind of follow the prompts. When I'm asked for a username, say this is the username I want to use. If I have to plug a code in, I plug the code in. That's not going to happen on every website you visit. It wants a password. I tell it what password to use. And I don't know the Adobe password. It's a great big strong 16-character password and I don't know what it is. And I don't have to know what it is because the keychain knows what it is, right? So same idea on the Mac. If you click on a username field, a little drop down will appear. You pick your username from the drop down menu. It'll fill in the username and the password. It'll sign you in. Very, very straightforward. Much easier than pulling a piece of paper out of the top right-hand drawer and typing in a username and a password all the time, right? Okay, so I'm going to sign out of this account and go back to the list of passwords. So as I mentioned earlier, like here's a AARP password here. If I swipe on this way, that will delete the password information from the keychain. You might see on your keychain several different entries for what appears to be the same website or the same vendor. Like, for example, I've got one here for Aries.net that uses my username, and I've got one for Aries.net that uses my wife's username. We both have an account with this Aries.net, but there are times when I need to use her account to see some of the information on that site. So the keychain treats these as different entities because the usernames are different. You might also have a situation where you have an entry on the keychain for the same website with the same user ID, right? In more than one instance of that, but the passwords are different. And what's probably the case is one of the passwords is wrong and one of the passwords is right. And you have to kind of test those to find out which one is the correct one, and then you can eliminate the one you want to get rid of. Okay. So if you see multiple entries for the same vendor with the same username, that means there are, duplicate, or you have passwords that are different, which makes each of the keychain entries a little bit different. So if you ever want to edit some password, you can tap one of these items and you'll see the username and you'll see the password. The password will actually show up as a series of bullets. You can just tap those bullets to reveal the password. If you want to edit the password, you can tap the edit button in the corner and you can add notes. You can change the username, change the password, but that's usually not the way you want to approach this. Here's the example I want to try to give you. Let's pretend that I want to change my Adobe password. Maybe I've got an Adobe password that's 4 characters long, and I want to change it into a strong password. What you don't want to do is edit the keychain data and then try to sign in, because Adobe only knows the 4-character password. It doesn't know the new password you want to use. What you want to do instead is sign in with Adobe with your current password, find the location on Adobe's website where you can change the password, and the password change that occurs will get saved automatically, typically back to the keychain. So let me try and give you an example of that. I'm going to go back to Adobe, right? And I've got a nice strong password here, and I don't know what the heck it is, and that's fine. But I want to change the password on the Adobe website. So this is the button that I tap. And this is going to open up. In this case, it's going to take me right to the account page for Adobe. So I don't have to go fishing around to try to find out where the password change button is. I'm just going to go ahead and sign in with my current Adobe username and password. And in this case, I think it's going to take me right to the place where I can change the password. And so if I tap change, I'm going to verify my identity by putting in my current password, right? Hold on a minute. Don't leave me. Well, it's asking me for my current password, which I don't know, okay? So this is a bad example, sorry about that. But I would type in my current password, tap continue, and then change it to a new strong password. And the keychain will save that back for me, okay? So typically, if you want to change these passwords, you need to use this change the password on the website button so that the keychain is picking up on the fact that you are changing the password. And it will usually save that password for you. If not, it will save it when you go to log out. It'll prompt you to save the password on the keychain. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this and just leave myself with this Adobe password that's here. Okay, so remember, you can't just jump into these passwords and change the password on the phone and hope that it works, because the vendor, the website vendor, is not going to know your new password. Okay, so be very careful with that. Any other questions before I get to this last topic?
We have a lot of questions, so maybe you should go through the last topic and then we'll start the Q&A portion.
Okay, that's fine. The last topic is actually pretty straightforward. It's called Help is on the Way. There's a new technology that has emerged. It's called passkeys. And Apple, Google, and Microsoft are all behind it. And the promise of passkeys is that there are no more passwords. And this will be a great day. It will put me out of business, but it will be a great day for all of us. So without getting too far into the weeds, with the details of this, there are things like public keys and private keys. And you can give any vendor a public key, and you keep the private key on your device. And when it comes time to sign in, the vendor sends the public key back to your device. The device authenticates you and sends back the information that allows you to log in. Okay. And so there are no passwords to create, retain, remember, or store. If a data breach occurs, the only thing that gets lost is a public key, which anybody can have. And it doesn't have any value unless it's matched up with the private key. So websites and app developers are going to need to update their websites and apps to handle passkeys. There's a few of them that are underway. I have a couple of them listed here. Kayak, which is a travel planning app. For its app on the phone, it has implemented passkeys. But for its website, it's still using passwords. So unfortunately, you have to still maintain, for Kayak, something that contains both a password and a passkey. So for example, if I look at Kayak here on my phone, I'm going to see up here passkey instead of password. Same kind of thing is going on with Best Buy. If you go to the Best Buy website and log in there, you can use passkeys. But if you use the Best Buy app, you have to use a password. PayPal, similar thing. If you sign into PayPal on the website, you can use a passkey, but the PayPal app has not been upgraded yet to use passkeys, so you have to use a password. So it's going to take some time for this to finally get rolling, but it's here now, and it promises to take us out of password hell, quite frankly, where we won't have to create passwords anymore. We'll just use passkeys. It's more secure. It's just as easy to do as using the keychain with passwords, and it has enormous, enormous promise. So keep an eye out for that. Anytime you get an opportunity to create a passkey, do it. It's no harder than creating a strong password, and it works just as effectively, and it's a little bit more secure. So that was my last topic. So we can go to questions if you like.
Okay. All right. We're going to start with Carl Steechrist. Can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, my question was about two-factor authentication. You said we needed to have that activated in order to sync the passwords on keychain. What about the use of 2FA with keychain and or security keys?
I'm not using security keys myself, but that's a recent addition to the Apple's operating system. I will say that one of the features of the keychain that we didn't really get into is the ability to have an authentication code or a verification code get sent right to the keychain. So this is a web hosting company that I have an account with. And I've set that account up so that after I try to log in, I have to also enter a code. It's another level of security, right? It's a two-factor thing. They're sending a code to my device that I need to be able to get access to and then enter. So there are third-party apps like Authy and those sorts of things that will send codes. A lot of companies will send a two-factor authentication code as a text message, for example. But one of the features of the keychain is that you can add a verification code. That's what's missing right here. You can't see it, but there's a 6-digit number in here and it changes every 30 seconds. So you can set the keychain up to send a verification code to the keychain rather than to a third-party app if you want to. So that's another feature of two-factor authentication built right into the keychain for those websites and apps that will support that.
Do you set the verification code up within keychain for each individual site?
You set up the verification code for each of these keychain entries with each website. So a lot of times the way you do this is you like sign into the a2hosting.com, for example, using say your Mac, and it might display a QR code on the screen. And so you kind of point your phone at the QR code and that helps set up the verification code. Or they might send you a link or something to tap to set up the verification code. Everybody does it a little bit differently. But you do need to set up the verification code feature for each website or app you're planning to use that for. You have to do that separately.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you. Okay. Michael Skapik, you're up. Dave Bogart, you're next. And Ed Adams, you're after Dave. Michael Skapik, please unmute yourself, ask your
Good
question.
morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Let's say I like the thought of keychain and I set it up, but somewhere along the line I made mistakes, which could happen quite easily as you get older. Is it possible to say, I want to start all over, I'm all messed up, and it says, no, you have to delete everything and start over and reload the computer. And I say, well, that's the price I pay for not doing it right the first time. Is that possible to get out of the setup clean and get everything back if you have all your, recovery systems on? If you have a problem with keychain, can you get out of it and then recover everything with, like do a restart? Can you recover everything so that you don't lose anything?
I'm not sure how to approach that. The keychain data, if you're syncing it through iCloud, is going to be stored in iCloud. So I guess what you might be able to do is turn off, say on the phone, turn off access to iCloud keychain and delete everything on the phone that's in the keychain area. And then maybe on the Mac, which is still connected to iCloud keychain, do all your password work there, fixing usernames, fixing passwords, whatever it may be, and sync that to iCloud, and then turn on iCloud keychain on the phone, and all your changes that are in iCloud will come down to your phone. But I don't know that you even need to do that. I mean, you can fix the passwords on the Mac, they'll sync to iCloud and come down to the phone. I'm not sure it's a good idea to toss all of your keychain data and start over from scratch, because if the password works, then it works. It's great. If it doesn't work, you can always reset the password and store it again on the keychain. So I don't think I'd nuke and pave in that case. I think I'd try to go down the list and figure out where the problems are and fix them as they arrive.
Okay, that's a good help. Thank you.
Okay.
I would tend to agree with that. There is so much in the keychain that you might not want to nuke it. All right, Dave, can you mute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. My question was about how to share a password with somebody in the family, for instance. Maybe it's a password to log into a Wi-Fi network, and I'm not physically close to the person I want to share with. What's the best way to let them use the router or something like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of security built into the keychain itself. Like, for example, if I go back here to A2 hosting, if you want to share a password that's on the keychain, and this keychain we're looking at here doesn't really store Wi-Fi networks, I don't believe. I'm pretty sure that's the case. These are all like website and app passwords, really. But if I wanted to share this a2hosting.com password with somebody else, there is a share button up here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the only share option is for AirDrop.
Right.
So if somebody's in the same room with you you can share it that way, right?
Yeah.
But you can't share directly out of the keychain, say through messages or mail or anything else. And that's a security thing, right? Email isn't terrifically secure. So the keychain is kind of discouraging you from sharing passwords electronically, except for AirDrop. Where you're doing it with somebody who's right in front of you, basically. So that's what you have to do.
Is it not? Is it possible to use messages? Is it more secure to share something via messages than via email?
Yes, if you're sending an iMessage, it is.
Yeah.
But there's no direct way to do that from the passwords list here. The only option for sharing from here is AirDrop.
Right, but
So
sometimes
if you wanted to send an iMessage to somebody else and type the password in, you could do that. And that's end-to-end encrypted. But Apple's purposely discouraging sharing passwords any other way than AirDrop directly from the list of passwords at this point.
sometimes I've been able to press the password and copy it.
Yeah. And then you can paste it.
Yeah.
And then you can send it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Ed Adams, do you have a question or comment you'd like to add?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Mike, great presentation. One problem I've run into using keychain is that when you're going in creating a password where there's a recipe for the password, if it doesn't do it right, you have no option to change it. You can't make it, for instance, if it says it 9 characters instead of 16 and it has this and it doesn't allow that, doesn't allow me to do that. 1Password does allow me to do that, which is nice. But do you have a way around that?
Well, you know what I've done sometimes is I've taken the strong password that's been presented and just lopped a couple of characters off the end or the beginning. And sometimes that makes it work. For example, if I go back to that Victoria's Secrets thing, right? And we don't want any of this stuff. We don't want the app. We just want to try to create a bogus account. So if I'm going to go in and create an account again, and I fill in my name and my email address. So here's this strong password down here, down below where you cannot see, the phone is blocking out. There's a blue button that says use the strong password or other options, right? So if I tap other options, a menu pops up. I can choose my own password. I can go with a password with no special characters. I can go with one that's easy to type. So there's a few options that are here if you choose to not take the password that the keychain is suggesting. And so one of these might solve the problem.
And I didn't know that was there. So thank you very much. Let me throw one other at you, which is not a question. If you go back, one of the things that's really nice about 1Password, also about keychain, is it tells you when there are passwords you have that have an issue of being repeated or they've been in the thing and you didn't show that. And I think it's an important feature.
Yeah, that's back here under security recommendations. I only have 74 security risks. Now, I'm going to mention this straight up. I have some passwords on my phone that are really for accounts my wife has. And her password hygiene is not quite as good as mine. And so that's what many of these are, okay? And so, for example, under AC Library, this password has appeared in a data leak, which puts this account at high risk of compromise. You should change the password immediately. Yes, I should do that. I will get around to doing it eventually. We all have these things, right? It'll point out when there are duplicative passwords, data leaks, that sort of thing. Every once in a while, I'll run into one like this one. This is at a school district that I'm at. Many people use this password, which makes it easy to guess. Well, this password was assigned to me, and they specifically chose a password that was very easy for them to set up, and they gave it to everybody. And I can't change that one without throwing their entire system sideways. So those I just have to kind of live with. There's also, I had a case where we had a credit card account at JCPenney and an account at JCPenney. And JCPenney had my username and password, and the third-party company that they use to do all of their credit card work wants to use the same JCPenney username and password to sign in. And so the keychain looks at this and says, yeah, you got a strong password at JCPenney, but you're using the same strong password at this other website. That's a problem. And that's another problem I can't fix, right? So some of the high priority recommendations or the security problems that are here may be out of your control, but others are probably within your control. And so I've got some stuff in here where I've got some things that I should probably go in and change. And so I'm just like the rest of you, and I will eventually get around to doing that. It's just going to take me a little bit of time before I do. Like here's Clipper, onecubic.com. Clipper is a company that uses transit cards in the Bay Area. And so my Clipper card has a password, and this onecubic.com has a password. This is a third party that Clipper uses. It's a reused password. I can't do anything about that, right? So most of my problems here are not that severe, frankly. But yeah, take a look at the security recommendations. That's a good place to look for problems.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Don Peacock, Dan Sellers, and Keith Kaiser. Please, Don, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thanks. I normally don't use Safari. So if I'm using another browser, Edge or Firefox or something, and I come to a place where I'm going to, they want me to establish a password, it gets stored within the browser. It doesn't get stored in Keychain. Is there any way for me to have Keychain do the password instead of the other browser?
Not that I'm aware of. I think you might have to copy and paste the password out of the browser and into the passwords list.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
All right. All right, Dan Sellers. Okay. Keith Kaiser, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
In
ahead.
on the Mac, in Keychain, under keys, there are a large number of keys entries, and they're all blank. They just say keys, and then there's a public key or a private key, it says, and then there's blanks, and then there says login, and then there's more blanks. There's like 30 or 40 of these. Can you tell me what those might be?
This is on the Mac
Yes, sir, on a Mac.
under the passwords list.
Correct.
Well, and you're not using Keychain Access, right? You're not using the Keychain Access app for this.
No, I just went to the Keychain, and this is under the keys topic in Keychain.
The keys topic in Keychain. Well, let me share a different window here.
Yeah, if you pull up Keychain and look at Keychain Access, and then you look under the titles, there's keys. So it goes from all items to passwords to secure notes to my certificate.
Right.
And then
So
keys.
that's the Keychain Access app. That's a different app, actually. So let me just bring that up real quick. So this window I'm showing you now is coming from system settings and passwords. And this is just a list of all my passwords that's syncing through iCloud Keychain, right? The window I'm about to show you is Keychain Access. And Keychain Access has been on the Mac for a very long time, and it stores all kinds of things. It stores certificates, it stores passwords, it stores a whole bunch of stuff. Secure notes, that sort of stuff, keys. Most of the time, yeah, this is probably what you're seeing, right? Something like this.
Yes, that's exactly what my question was
Most
about.
people should never go in here, myself included, okay? The only time that I ever have to go in here is to try to resurrect somebody's email password. Email passwords are not stored on the keychain. And it feels like just about anytime you do any kind of a serious software upgrade to your Mac or your iPhone or your iPad, you're often asked to put in your email password again to get your email working. And for people who can't remember what that is, I'll frequently go into keychain access and look around for web or mail servers to try to resurrect email passwords. But typically, to manage the keychain that contains usernames and passwords for websites and apps, like we've been doing during this entire class, you shouldn't be going into keychain access for any of that stuff. You should just deal with the passwords list in system settings. Keychain access predates kind of where we are with the keychain these days, and hopefully you never have to go into keychain access. I wouldn't go in here and start fooling with anything in here. I may be going to look something up once in a while, but I wouldn't go in here and fiddle with this at all if you can help it.
Okay, roger that. Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. You don't want to fiddle around with this. But at one instance, on one of my new computers, I was backing up my phone to iMazing. And iMazing asked me for an iPhone password that I had put on my phone 3 years prior and forgotten about. I went to an old, for days, it's like I didn't know what it was talking about. And then I remembered. And I went to an old computer that I almost never use, opened up keychain access, and found that password.
Wow.
It was incredible. Yeah, it was incredible. But it was only here that I found it.
Yeah.
So, all right, with that, we're going to have one last question from Melissa Green. Melissa, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. Good presentation today. I sometimes enter a password and the device tells me, no, that's not it. And then I enter the same thing again, and then I get open access. So I'm wondering, am I typing too fast? Do I have to wait for the last dot to appear, cross my fingers, cross my ankles, and then hit the button to log in?
I would try sacrificing a chicken. That might work.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's just a matter of you incorrectly typed the password the first time. That's the only thing I can think of.
All right, that's what you're saying, and but my scrambled eggs will tell.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the question, Melissa. And with that, it is 12:45. It's time to end our presentation. Mike, thank you for an excellent presentation. And could everyone please unmute themselves and thank you. Thank Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Very good.
Great job.
Thank you, Mike.
Presentation, Mike.
Good job.
Thank you,
Mike.
Great job.
Great job.
Thank you.
All right. Very good.
Mike.
Well, thank you all. I'm going to take the rest of the day off.
All right. All right, Dan, all yours.
All right.
You earned it.
See you later.
Yeah, so thank you again, Mike. And don't forget, everyone, next week, we are going to have with us Adam Inksten. Like I said, it's always great to hear from, I don't know where my keynote is there. It's always great to hear from Adam. So join us next week. And outside of that, everyone have a good weekend, and we will see you next week.
All right. Be well. Thank you.